Welcome everybody to the next session today, the Digital Transformation Action Plan. Very pleased to see you all here. I'm Justin Vaughan-Brown, Digital Transformation Lead within CA Technologies, and I'll be the panel host for the session today. But I'm not the real star of today. We have three experts in digital transformation who I'm very, very pleased to introduce. From the left here, Chris Rowett, who heads up our DevOps technical sales globally, who's had huge experience of working with customers around the world and helping them accelerate application development. Ray Wang, CEO of Constellation Research, a digital transformation guru who's written several books on the topic, has over 70,000 Twitter followers. Delighted to have Ray here today. And lastly, Joe Lamano, partner at PwC, and a gentleman who has extensive experience in e-commerce, and more recently now heads up or leads a part of the PwC digital transformation team. So without further ado, I guess the key question is, why are we even here? Why are we talking about digital transformation? It's because we all need to change, and there's an imperative around that. So a little data point for you, which I've stolen from Ray, which I keep stealing, but it's a great one, which is that since the year 2000, over half of the Fortune 500 are just no longer around. They've disappeared for multiple reasons. So familiar household names that we all know, I won't name them, but I'm sure you are aware of those, have all gone because of the impact that digital has made. And some other data points here from a guy who's a senior lecturer at Yale University here. The average lifespan of an S&P company has dropped from a multi-generational 67 years, tried and trusted. You know, we use that company. My grandmother used it, my grandfather, my parents, I'll use that company. Well, now the average lifespan has dropped from 67 years in the 1920s to just 15 years today. We all know what we were doing 15 years ago. On average, an S&P company is now being replaced every 2 weeks. That's the velocity of change that we're dealing with. And lastly, 75% of the S&P 500 will be replaced by new firms by 2027. So that's from Richard Foster, a clever guy, he's at Yale, he must be smart. But I think a lot of the data points that he has there are very, very valid. So without further ado, I'd like to kick off with the first question to our panel. Where does the digital transformation journey begin? Where does it start? And I'd like to ask that to Ray, first of all.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So what we're seeing in the marketplace, and you're probably feeling this, is that in digital transformation, at the top, it's a business model shift, and it's a business model change. And to summarize that in a very quick way, think about the world as a post-sale, on-demand attention economy. Post-sale, meaning everything after the sale, is as important or more important than the sale. So think about installation, service, warranties, that continual renewal process that's actually happening. And when we talk about on-demand, think about the fact that people don't buy big sets of products, services, experiences, or insights anymore. They're consuming smaller and smaller chunks of that. So you don't go out and buy a server anymore, you go to the cloud, right? And that's a great example there. And it's also an attention economy, because if I don't capture your attention or save you time, you're not relevant to me. And this is happening not just in B2C, it's happening in B2B across different places.
Great answer, thanks Ray. And now Chris, I mean, you've been closely involved with many customers over the last 4+ years at CA. What kind of insights can you share?
So I think there is a real drive in the market mainly. You know, we used to change because we wanted to gain competitive advantage or we wanted to move into a new market, but it was a business strategy that started internally. And now we're being forced through the application economy to respond in brand new ways, through brand new channels to what our customers are demanding, whether we want to or not. So it's the do or die. You know, from the stats we stole earlier, you know, if we don't do these things, it's not just that, you know, we're struggling in the market, we're no longer relevant.
You don't exist anymore.
You don't exist anymore. So it's really the focus to say, we're on a digital transformation journey, not because we want to, but because we must to survive. So yes, we have to get started, but we need to rapidly think, how do we evolve through that journey as fast as possible to continue to deliver compelling business outcome?
Great. And to that point, so we've established you need to do something, but Joe, what are the common misconceptions that you find amongst clients when they feel, yeah, we need to get going, but they start from the wrong point of view or place?
I think the biggest misconception that we see is companies thinking that they just need a digital strategy.
Right.
I need e-commerce, I need a mobile app. And they don't really step back and look at their overarching business strategy and think about, is it applicable to the digital age? Is it applicable to this on-demand world that we're living in today?
Right, so don't regard it in isolation at all as a bolt-on. It has to be something far more fundamental and basic, integral.
That's right, because it's not just about the digital, but it's also about the operations that are needed to support it. It's about the technology as well, and it's about the customer experience also.
Right, well, that is actually a great segue to our next question here, which is, how do you achieve true custom centricity? And I'll come back to you, Joe, because in some of our conversations before around this event, you had a very strong conviction that it isn't just about technology, it's something far more profound.
That's right. Technology is very important. Right? It enables all this great innovation that we're seeing today. But we think it's very important that companies first think about the customer experience and really think about or look at that outside-in perspective, identify those capabilities, those wants and needs that your customers have, so that then you can take that information, you can take those capabilities and build out the technology and the supporting operations to deliver.
Right, and Ray, from your point of view, which organizations or companies are doing this well, that have a really good view of the whole customer journey and are capturing those integral components?
Oh, we see a lot of that in hospitality. We see a lot of that in financial services as they're making a shift. I have to be very careful about the clients that I'm talking about, but there are 3 principles, and I'm going to start real quick. Like, how many people remember choose your own adventure books? Remember, you start on page 1, go to page 15, go to page 100, come back to 20? So the companies that get it, they start with choose your own adventure journeys, because you don't fit into force-fit funnels or force-fit customer journeys. People want to go be self-directed, and so you start with that piece. The second thing that they do really well is they look at context. And context, think about role, relationship, location, temperature. Oh my God, heart rate. Right? Oh, that's an interesting indicator of sentiment. And so we start pulling those pieces together. And then the third thing that actually happens is these companies are focused on intention-driven design. And what I mean by intention-driven is it's not about knowing what happened in the past, it's about learning over time what you're going to do next. And so, I don't know, does anybody here get coffee in the morning at the same time and buy coffee? Okay, I'm going to pick on you real quick, sorry about this. I'm going to pick on you. When do you get coffee? What time?
6 o'clock.
Dunkin' or Starbucks? None of them? So you buy your own coffee at a different place, a boutique. Okay, so we know that about her, but when traveling, would you go to Dunkin' or Starbucks? Sometimes, right? And that's the thing that we learn. So over time, imagine like 20 more interactions, we learn that you might get coffee with food. If you're traveling, you do something different. And that's how we build these journeys. And so the companies that are doing customer experience really well are figuring out how to build these types of journeys. And they've done a great job of actually making that self-directed, contextual, and also intention-driven.
Is that rather than forcing a customer to their fixed view of what the journey should be?
Exactly.
Great. And Chris, taking the flip side, what examples have you seen of customers who've been doing great things?
It's a great question, but I'm going to duck it. And the reason I'm going to duck it is because everybody is on this journey.
Right.
Where we started saying there's an imperative for a digital transformation, we said it's do or die.
Yeah.
We said you have to go on this journey to be relevant. Compelling stats about how long companies survive these days. So everyone's on this journey. Everybody here is here because they're in the app economy, they're thinking about these problems, and they're wondering how they start and what that maturity curve looks like as they go through it to maintain that outstanding customer experience, to be able to support the customer stories and convert them into revenue streams. So we're talking here, but we've got more than 15 customers over this conference talking about where they are on that journey, what they've done, whether that's ING, whether that's T-Mobile. Please go to those sessions, talk to the speakers afterwards and understand where they are on the journey, because they're all doing incredible things, and we all have to do incredible things if we still want to be relevant.
Great, good. Thanks very much. Our next question now moves more potentially inwardly focused in terms of looking at digital transformation. What operational efficiencies should you prioritize? Ray, any thoughts?
Yeah, actually, so if you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, remember keep me safe, keep me sheltered, worry about my ego? We look at it the same way from a business perspective. And so at the very bottom is regulatory compliance, don't get me sued, don't get me fired, don't get me killed, right? The next level up is operational efficiency. For every dollar invest, I'm going to save you 2, 3, or 4. That stuff on the bottom of the pyramid, that's what you want to operationalize. That's the stuff you want on robots. You want automation. You want to mechanize as much of that as possible. The higher level things, revenue and growth, which is thinking about for every dollar invest, I'm going to make you 2 or 3. Strategic differentiation, which is really your business model shift. And then the brand, right? If your company was a person, who would they be? Or really, why do you exist? That stuff, that's the important part. The problem is we actually form as companies, we focus our efforts, our resources, our time on this pyramid. So when push comes to shove, regulatory compliance wins, operational efficiency wins. What we want to do is flip the pyramid, and so we can focus more time on the brand, why we exist, what problem are we trying to solve, and how does that tie back to our business model so that we can think about products and services that support that. The problem is if you don't flip the pyramid, you shrink your way to greatness, which is what most companies do. They focused on margin as opposed to growth. If you're a growth-oriented company, you figure out how to flip the pyramid and you start automating that stuff with cloud. You get all your testing, you get all your app dev, you do your DevOps so well that you can start focusing on your mission. And that's really a short way of answering that.
Right, and do you see huge cultural challenges in flipping that?
It's very hard. If you got a lot of inertia, if you got all existing teams that are doing things, it's very hard to do that. Think about the first time you went to Agile or Scrum. That's really hard, right? Because waterfall is great. People aren't in your face. They're not bothering you. You actually have time to think, right? Then you flip over to like Scrum and Agile. What happens, right? You're like constantly on sprints. You're doing check-ins. You're standing. It's like hell, right? But if you need to move fast and you need velocity, you have to do that. And so that's the same kind of shift we're seeing. You're seeing multimodal teams, not bimodal. Bimodal kind of doesn't work. It depends on the prioritization of where you are, and then you make the flip against that.
Right, thanks. And Chris, where should companies who are seeking to make those improvements kind of address issues around, say, the way they build, test, and release applications?
Well, for me, that's the engine room, right? So absolutely, as a company, you need to think about, your organizational structure and your people and processes, and you need to be adopting Agile. But then you need the engine room in the software development lifecycle, because the way we survive in this market is by improving the cadence and quality that we can bring innovation to outstanding customer experience. So that's around continuous delivery. That's around building that engine room and reinventing our software lifecycle to become an automated engine to promote outstanding innovation at high speed. So you have to be thinking about what that strategy is. You have to be thinking in parallel with the Agile transformation that you're not just doing in IT, you're doing to your business. How can you then put in that accelerated factory floor that's going to take the code at high quality through that pipeline and bring it in a stable fashion into your production where it can be consumed through the channels that all of our customers want to consume our goods and services through.
But it's that speed yet maintaining quality, and that's always a challenge to maintain that balance, isn't it?
It's huge, and actually, we talk a lot about automation and building, these end-to-end factories. Quality, not testing, quality is the foundation for all of that. If we just put in an automated pipeline, we're accelerating problems.
Yes.
So we need to think first about quality and what does that look like, and build the automation framework so it's embedded in everything we do. And now we have a business engine that provides our weapon to survive in the market, because we can outpace our competitors, our traditional competitors. We can outpace digital disruptors that come into our markets and try and build new business digital models that we can't traditionally compete with. Now we have an engine where we can match their pace of innovation, whatever scale of business we are.
Right, gotcha. I mean, in talking about matching the competition, Joe, so what kind of metrics should you have in place to measure improvements in efficiencies?
Yeah, I think to put metrics together, you really need to understand the transformation that you're going through.
Right.
You need to set goals so that you can measure and optimize through the transformation. So when I work with clients, what we typically do is we have them look at the entire customer journey, which we describe as discover, transact, fulfill, use, and care.
Right.
In each one of those stages, it's going to vary by industries. If I look at the enterprise software industry, and if I look at that life cycle, right, the goal of digital transformation for enterprise software is not necessarily to just sell online. We see a lot of our enterprise software companies really focusing on the discover stage.
Right.
How can I get more information to my customers? How can I get better leads? How can I get better information to my customers so that my salespeople have more qualified leads? Right? And then also the service aspect. I think Ray had mentioned that earlier, right? That post-sale experience. Those are the areas that in that particular industry, people should be measuring. We're seeing other industries like CPG, where a lot of companies are focused on direct-to-consumer models. So these are companies that traditionally sold through distributors, but now they want to have a direct relationship with their customers. And they need to bring on new capabilities to sell and deliver.
So there's a new level of customer intimacy that they need to kind of manage and control and be aware of how the dynamics are changing.
That's exactly right. And the other one that we're seeing that I think is quite interesting is companies trying to leverage the existing e-commerce ecosystem around them, right? How can I leverage the big box retailers? How can I leverage all these on-demand services to get products and services to my customers?
Great, thanks. Okay, we're going to move on to probably the key question of all, which is the promise of the session, which was, what should the digital transformation framework look like? What are the core components that you should absolutely include? And Ray, I've seen some of your thoughts on this before in what you've written, so I'd just like to open with you with what you see as those core components.
So there's the business model component, which is important, right? And I think you touched on some of the very interesting ones. I think you need to be able to walk in with a very interesting case at the beginning by saying, if you're in CPG or pharma or in a place where recalls becomes very important, that the case starts out like, if your recall takes 8 weeks, that's going to cost you $8 billion. If your recall takes 8 days, that's going to cost you $800 million. And if your recall takes 8 hours, that's going to cost you $8 million. What do we need to do to get there? Right? It is that dramatic, right? And what you want to be able to do is set up the framework to be able to answer these sets of questions. And this is where a lot of times we think about design thinking as a way to solve problems to questions you haven't even asked. And we start with that kind of beginning. Then we can start looking at the business models, and then we can start looking at specifically what you need to do in terms of the teams, right? There's a piece we haven't talked about, which is humanizing digital. If we got a lot of people on the science, technology, engineering, math side, I got to balance them out with ethnographers, people that can tell stories, user experience folks, people that understand design. And then at that point, then I got to start looking at how do I capture that data.
Right.
And that data piece is important because I'm not using the data just to have data. I want to go from data to information, take the information stream to insights, study the patterns of those insights, and then be able to take action. And once I can do that data to decisions framework, then I can then figure out what I can do to open up platforms to do co-innovation and co-creation. So we look at it in those kind of 5 steps.
Great, and that's pretty comprehensive. Joe, taking the consultancy point of view, where do you look at this?
So the way that we look at it is, we recently launched an initiative called Commerce Next, and it's around helping our clients achieve this next generation of commerce. And the way that we focus on it, our framework, is to really start off by taking that outside-in approach, going out and getting the voice of the customer, and then getting the voice of the business. Are they aligned, right? Are the things that you're good at, or the things that you want to focus on, are those the things that your customers think that you're good at? Are they the things that your customers want and expect from you? And by doing that, that will help you define the customer experience that you want to build out for them. That customer experience then should lead into a set of capabilities that you need to deliver to your customers. From there, you look at the technology needed to implement those capabilities, and then all the operational process to support all of that.
So that can actually involve some quite radical thinking, where traditionally most companies say, well, we have these teams, these departments organized in this way because we've always done it, we've always been like this. And now suddenly you're having to make some radical and perhaps painful decisions in terms of reallocating resources, moving people around, possibly even letting them go because their skill set doesn't match and map to what you need going forward. Have you had experience of that?
Yeah, so the layer of complexity that we see digital adding to a lot of companies is digital presents this single face of the company to the customer.
Right.
And it can't be a fragmented experience between, let's say, selling something online and service capabilities delivered online.
Right.
Your customer should not be able to see your internal organization by navigating through your website.
Yeah, customers don't care what department you're in.
Exactly right, exactly right. And so the challenge that companies have is getting all of those stakeholders to work together, establishing governance structures, establishing new business processes, new operational metrics that have these different departments working together very well aligned to deliver that single face to the customer versus the traditional silos that they've worked in for many, many years.
Which they're being traditionally very comfortable with as well.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where I think some of the older, more established companies struggle, where some of the newer digital disruptors are a lot more nimble. Part of it's just their size, and part of it's the culture of those companies, but that's what we see as being a big roadblock for many companies.
Got you. And Chris, I mean, what are your perspectives coming from your role within the DevOps team?
Yeah, so I mean, in my role, I get the privilege of visiting globally a lot of our, enterprise and medium enterprise-sized customers as they're all going on this journey. And the commonality is everybody knows they have a problem to fix. The challenges and the two ends of the spectrum are how much of a urgency they have around fixing the problem. Because especially the larger the enterprise, the more the harder it is because they have more legacy. They've got more established processes.
I wouldn't start from here.
Yeah, they've got more siloed departments. So there's a lot of stuff I'll come on to talk about how do you start, what's the approach, and where do you go. Mm-hmm. But none of that's relevant until the business understands they're actually on a burning platform. If we don't change, we're dead. And that's a really hard message. You might get some levels of management to get it, but as that dilutes down through the organization and the different teams are measured on different KPIs, that can get a very distant voice very quickly. So the most important thing is to understand we have a problem, to understand we need to react to the most disruptive market changes that's happened probably in 20 years. And how are we going to do that? So, so the customers I talk to, if they understand clearly they have that problem, and they understand that if they don't do something disruptive to change it, a digital disruptor is going to come into their market and destroy them, disintermediate them, put them at the end of a value chain, then the transformation and the culture change required to do the transformation is super hard.
And I'm going to take it down real quick too as well. I'm going to take it like 3 levels down, which is really important, is if you look at what you do in DevOps today, that is how the whole organization actually needs to work. Just think about the way you co-locate everybody at the same spot, the number of sprints that you have to do, the amount of coordination and collaboration that happens. And so while we're doing it top down by saying, hey, here's our new business model, let's go over in this direction, on the other hand, the teams have to be ready, right? Because what we've discovered is that the companies that are doing really well are the companies that are actually either doing a lot of app dev on their own or contracting for services, because the stuff that we're trying to do, the business models we're trying to support, it doesn't exist out there. You can't buy a package for this stuff. This stuff hasn't been invented yet, and that's why a lot of this DevOps piece is really important. How you build that culture of really successful DevOps teams actually translates really well across the business side.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, there's a ton of data that shows how people who are adopting DevOps, who are being digital disruptors, they're making more money. Right, they're surviving better in the market, so we have to do it. So, I see customers who've embraced this from the top down. They've put in Agile across the board. They're doing DevOps. They put in all the tooling, and they're making a big difference. But we also see a lot of customers who start the journey and then it gets stuck very quickly. So for me, what should be in your digital framework? You have to figure out how you're going to communicate the need to change. So you have to figure out how you align to what are the business initiatives and the corporate strategy that's taking the business from where it is to somewhere where it can compete as a digital disruptor in its own right in maybe a very big regulated traditional market, depending on the industry it's in. So how do we start by creating the internal evangelism and the communication we're going to need to continue to get the investment and the focus as we transform from what we used to do to what we need to do now with DevOps, with continuous delivery, with Agile, to get to a pace we need to be. So once we do that, then we figure out where to start. And when, because we're on a transformation journey, we have to measure the whole way through. So we have to pick an area we can showcase, we can trial these new approaches, we can measure the improvements, and then we can use that as an internal selling tool to showcase what the art of the possible. And then we build a roadmap to say, well, what does the rest of the transformation look like? Because we can't do it overnight, and the larger we are, the longer it will take. But at least we've shown what the end state looks like and how we're going to survive in that market.
That's a good point. To your point, Joe, you find that whole evangelism imperative is super important.
I do. This needs to be from the top down.
Yep.
Right. But just kind of jumping on what these guys have been talking about, I think the point on measurement is really important. Yep. I think not only when we're talking about DevOps and how we implement and build out new technology, I think the business needs to have a culture of measure and optimize and be ready for frequent change. right? It's not good enough to just launch something new, to implement new procedures, to implement new digital technology without continuously measuring and optimizing it and being ready for further change, because that's not what customers are expecting. We talk about being in this on-demand world now. The expectation is if something doesn't work, if something is not to my satisfaction, it should be fixed, or I am going to go somewhere else from a customer perspective.
I am that demanding. It should change or improve, or I go somewhere else.
That's right. I have a lot of choice. There's a lot of opinions out there in social media. If something isn't working for me, I can quickly go and find something that's going to suit my needs.
And to your point, Ray, social media, what impact have you seen in your role in terms of how social's impacted customer adoption and potentially retention, but also losing customers as well, attrition?
I think what we're seeing with social media is a shift in channels. Instead of broadcast, what we're now doing is engaging. And we're taking engagement to experience, which is going to change that even more drastically by context, right? This issue of context is playing a big role if you think about Internet of Things.
Yeah.
So for example, customer experience in the world of Internet of Things, is as simple as thinking about scenes and settings, not omni-channel. And I'll give you a great example. So imagine I'm going to take a work experience real quick, but imagine you walk into work, or actually you go in your car, you drive to work, you're 15 minutes late, your car tells Outlook you're 15 minutes late. You have the option now to delay every meeting by 15 minutes, slice off 5 minutes on every meeting, and you make that choice. You get into the garage, you get into the lobby, they see you, that's great. You get into the elevator, it knows, hey, you're on the 10th floor, okay, would you like to be on the 10th floor, but your boss is available for 10 minutes on the 8th floor. That's kind of pretty cool. And by the way, squirrel, there's cake on the 6th floor. What do? Do you take the cake, or do you go meet with your boss, right? And you get to your meeting and these things start popping out. So what we're seeing is massive context emerge. This happens in shopping, this happens in field service. We're going to see all these different things pop up. That's the kind of stuff that we're trying to get to in short.
No, that's great input. And now, Chris, just talking about frameworks, do you want to talk about the current state workshop in terms of the role that plays in our framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're on a journey. So today, wherever you are, so across the world, I'm talking to prospects and customers who are they're all thinking about it. Everyone's thinking about the need to transform, to do DevOps, to do Agile. So they're either thinking about it, or they're somewhere in the middle of that transformation, or they're fairly mature. And in this hall, we have people at all ends of that spectrum on the journey. So quite frequently, the questions they're asking us is, how do we go from where we are now to where we need to be? So we have a current state workshop, we call it, where we would come in and assess where you are today. We'd look at your, what is your process, your business process, your software development process that takes innovation, puts it through the factory and delivers that outstanding quality. How do you do that today? Are you waterfall? Is it all on premise? Or are you somewhere further on the journey? And from that, we would be able to build you a prioritized roadmap that says, if this is what good looks like at the end of that journey, where you need to be, what are the steps, in what order should you address those challenges as you move through the people, process, and technology part of that? Because that gives you at least a roadmap to say, how do I get started? Because it's a big transformation. It takes a while, it takes guts, it takes business drivers to do, but it also, it's helpful if you've got someone who says, well, here's what we're seeing in the industry, here's what other people are doing, here's the pitfalls you can avoid, and here's a good end state that you need to get to.
Let me give you a 5-step framework in 30 seconds, real quick.
Go for it, Ray.
All right, so start with that point that you're talking about, design thinking. Think about the business model and experiences you want to build. What does your brand stand for? Start there. Second thing, make sure you get the right teams of people. We want digital artisans. So the people that we're talking about, getting left brain, right brain people on the right team. The third piece is then start figuring out what you need to do from a technology perspective to support those new business models. That is going to be the hardest part, trying to identify which pieces to put in, because it is partly mobile, it's partly what's happening in commerce, it's what's happening in social. There's a lot of distractions. I've got to stay focused on where it is. Fourth piece is make sure that I have the data that I'm collecting, because I want to go from gut-driven to data-driven decisions. This is going to drive a lot of the future of what I do. And then the last piece really is to create a platform for other partners and even competitors to co-innovate and co-create on top. That's where you get the digital scale. That's where you get a lot of direct-to-consumer models and the P2P pieces that are happening.
Perfect.
Right, thanks. Joe, the final word.
Yeah, I think just to add on that point, one of the things that we're seeing successful companies do is change the model in how they innovate, right? We're seeing a lot of formal co-creation exercises. We're seeing the merging of the left brain and right brain professionals together.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've done is we've invested significantly in building out our experience centers where we actually do those things, right? We bring our clients in, we have the left brain people, the right brain people, we have a methodology around helping them innovate and co-create, and it works, right? It is a different way of thinking, and companies that are investing in that model, I think, are going to be successful with digital transformation.
Right, thanks so much. And just on time there, thanks everyone, and to our panel for attending. I strongly recommend Ray's new book to check that out. It's excellent reading and some really good insights. Visit the DevOps Center over there, find out about the current state workshop and our solutions, and PwC are also exhibiting here, so again, I urge you to go over there. Thanks very much, thanks for your time.